Thank you for your patience. We would like to start the afternoon sessions. We will begin with a special speech that will be given in a form of video message from the Indonesian Finance Minister, Sri Mulyani Indrawati.
His Excellency Mr. Tetsushi Sonobe, the Dean of ASEAN Development Bank Institute and T7 Japan Lead Chair, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. I would like to convey my appreciation to the Asian Development Bank Institute and the T7 for the opportunity to speak at this very important summit. This is another reminder for all of us of the importance of the research-based policy, especially during this very dynamic and global challenging time. The theme of this year is T7 Japan Summit, Addressing Crisis, Reigniting Sustainable Development, Bridging the G7 and G20. This reflects the urgent need for all of us to work collaboratively to build a more sustainable and resilient future for all. I look forward to experts as well as the recommendation by T7 to support policy discussion at the G7 summit next month. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the global growth outlook for 2023 remains uncertain and becoming so weakened, with various factors expected to drag the growth down, such as geopolitical tension, fragmentation, narrower fiscal space, tighter liquidity, and high increased interest rate because of the high inflationary pressure. The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in the United States, which followed by the crisis in the European Bank with the Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank situation, has shocked the public and put significant strain on the confidence of the market. This is a very complex and interconnected global challenges that cannot be solved by any country alone. It requires collective action, especially from the G20 as the premier forum for international economic cooperation and other multilateral institutions. As you may all have been aware, Indonesia, as G20 presidency last year, was very successful in navigating the global situation and maintaining the solidity and integrity of the G20 as a premier cooperation of the economic area with so many global challenges, especially due to the crisis because of pandemic, geopolitical tension, especially war in Ukraine, and also geopolitical tension others. We also need to continue focus on how the G20 can provide solution to the global challenge. We have contributed to the world concrete deliverables on the finance track that simultaneously also support three pillars of Indonesia G20 presidency. The first is global health architecture, the second one, sustainable energy transition, and the third one, digital transformation. First, during the Indonesia presidency, we were able to establish the pandemic fund to support our presidency focus on strengthening global health architecture. Second, we also, within the agenda of sustainable energy transition, the G20 members agreed to ensure that access to energy remains secure, affordable, and available, and encourage technology transfer, as well as ensuring the availability of funding for energy. And within the agenda of digital transformation, we initiated the implementation of regional payment connectivity, or RPC. In a number of ASEAN countries, continue the discussion that we are working with the central bank digital currencies, and also the endorsement of Yogyakarta Financial Inclusion Framework. This is how to digitalize and utilize the digital technology for the advancement financial services to boost productivity and especially helping the marginal or vulnerable group, which is including small and medium enterprises, women and young people. To the extent of sustainable energy transition, which is a very important on the sustainable finance, we welcome and support the T7 process that will bring the discussion on well-being, environmental sustainability, as well as how to design a just transition. Last November, Indonesia launched the Energy Transition Mechanism or ETM, country platform. This is a platform for the collaboration of all bilateral, multilateral, private sector, philanthropy, as well as Indonesia's own effort to design the right, just, affordable energy transition. We also receive support from Just Energy Transition Partnership or JETP, which we hope can promote a just and affordable transition energy in Indonesia as well as other parts of Asia or even beyond. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic for the last 3 years is creating a huge global challenge. And the current recent global economic challenges in terms of the increasing interest rate, tighter liquidity and interest rate has creating a huge challenge for all policymakers. Within this context and also facing with the potential climate change challenges, a stronger and close cooperation are needed, not only all the country, but particularly of G7 and G20 as a two important group of countries which have a significant influence to the global well-being. The cooperation needs to be strengthened within the context of multilateral cooperation and multilateralism. The G20 and the G7 collaboration have been demonstrated at the implementation of the G20 Sustainable Finance Roadmap, common framework for debt treatment, especially for the low-income country and middle-income country, and Debt Service Suspension Initiative or DSSI. These two forums also working in joint finance and health task force of the OECD G20 Inclusive Framework two-pillar solution, especially on the taxation and G20 principle for quality infrastructure investment. The latest G7 finance minister and central bank governors statement also reiterated the commitment to stepping up effort to support low and middle income countries, which are disproportionately affected by the current geopolitical tension through the crisis in energy and food and wider global challenges. In this spirit, the G20 will work closely with the G7 members as an international partner and with the international organization to advance ongoing work, especially in recovering the economy of many of the countries which is facing with the very daunting task. One of the most important agenda to help them is through MDB's evolution or reform, addressing debt vulnerability of many low-income and middle-income and strengthening the global health architecture as well as tackling climate change. This year, Indonesia is also still holding the ASEAN chairmanship. Following our successful G20 presidency, we will also have this commitment to deliver a strong outcome from this ASEAN as a forum. Our theme for the ASEAN chairmanship is ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth. We look forward to sharing ASEAN voice on the importance agenda being considered by not only G20 but also G7. Japan is holding the G7 chairmanship. So these are all very important reasons for Indonesia and Japan to cooperate and strengthening our collaboration. There are main priority economic deliverable within ASEAN, which is already intersect with the priority within the G20 as well as G7. This is including transition finance for the energy, finance and health, and infrastructure finance, as well as the discussion on the financial sector. We would like also to highlight one area in which G7 and G20, as well as ASEAN, can collaborate further, which is the work on disaster reconstruction and resilient development. As the frequency of natural disaster due to the climate change is going to be even escalated, this is a very important issue. I think this area is work which is also a very important for the ADB and the ADB Institute. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, disaster reconstruction and resilient development have been critical issue for Indonesia, a country located at the ring of fire, due to the frequency occurrence of natural disasters such as earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruption, as well as floods. Indonesia government and other stakeholders have been developing various initiatives and policy to improve our disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. We also work very hard to promote resilience development, covering at least 4 key areas: disaster risk financing reduction, environmental sustainability, social and economic development, and certainly good governance. In terms of the budget and financing, we have allocated disaster reserve funds for emergency response as well as rehabilitation and reconstruction. We also realize that Indonesia needs to shift the financing approach from reactive to more proactive. This following the devastating earthquake and tsunami that struck the city of Palu back in 2018, or even before that when we faced with tsunami in Aceh. Since then, Indonesia has already launched a disaster risk financing insurance, or DRFI, a strategy which consists of mixed financing instrument, not only public financing, but also pooling the fund so that we are going to be able to develop innovative financing scheme to finance the recovery and rebuilding post-disaster. There are still challenges and opportunity for further improvement. This include the root cause of vulnerability that need to be identified, how to promote sustainable development so that they are becoming more resilient, how we should strengthen governance and institutional capacity, and also ensuring that marginalized and vulnerable community are included in the decision-making process, especially during and within the disaster situation. In many cases, the community that are most affected by disaster are the ones that have the best understanding of how the local context and the most effective solution for rebuilding is going to be effective. By involving local community in the reconstruction process, we can help to ensure that their need as well as their aspiration and priority are taken into account. For example, during the Aceh tsunami disaster, which is devastated back in 2004, local community were involved in the planning and designing of housing, rebuilding their housing, as well as rebuilding infrastructure. This will ensure that they were culturally appropriate and met the need of the local and the people in the location. Indonesia experiences in disaster reconstruction and resilient development can certainly provide an important insight into the future reconstruction effort for many other countries that need to have this kind of experience. For example, Ukraine, which is currently certainly will face a daunting task of rebuilding the country. By adopting a comprehensive and integrated approach, involving local community, engaging stakeholders, and promoting resiliencies, country undergoing reconstruction can work toward a more resilient and sustainable future, especially in the aftermath of the conflict or disasters. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this year, India holds the G20 presidency, while Japan holds the G7 chairmanship. With one Earth, one family, one future, which the theme taken or held by the G20, we will be able to continue work closely between G20 and G7. I hope the T7 can provide support in developing global policy outcomes that are effective, equitable, as well as sustainable, especially by providing research, evidence-based policy recommendation. In closing, we look forward to further collaborate between the G20 and G7, particularly within the context of initiative which is being proposed by the T7. I wish you all a very successful and productive summit. Thank you.
It was a great speech. We really appreciate your contribution, Minister Sri Mulyani.